This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to the latest episode of DocNJock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me, my guy Adam, the Jock Strozinski. We got a lot to break down. A 9-1 football team. It's amazing when the Detroit Lions are expected to curb stomp someone and they actually go do it. But 52-6, my goodness. Number one NFL team, widely regarded in each and every power poll that came out this week. It was nice to see, from Sports Illustrated to all of the other major outlets, the Detroit Lions are the number one team in the NFL. And everyone's talking Super Bowl. How do they match up with the Bills, Ravens, Chiefs? It's an amazing time. I hope everybody's sitting back and truly enjoying what the Detroit Lions are doing. It's amazing. It's fun. We're going to talk all about it, especially with a key veteran going down. But to start the show, I got to check in with my guy Adam about the Detroit Red Wings after a really terrible West Coast trip. The talk is starting. The heat underneath Derek LaLonde's seat is super hot. The fan base is pissed. They're not happy. I see it all over the internet. I see the graphics. You know it's bad when a coach's face is plastered on all the graphics these kids are making and it says "Fire Derek LaLonde." It's bad because this hockey team is playing uninspired. That West Coast trip, I caught all the games. I just thought the defense looked porous. They lacked intensity. Goaltending not as crisp. You realize you're not getting the best play from your best forwards defensively, and you're like, whoa. When you realize that your best players are kind of playing the worst hockey, this is a bad sign. By the time this comes out, do you think Derek LaLonde will have a job? Because a lot of people are saying if he loses Thursday at home on home ice at LCA, this could be it for LaLonde, because the NHL is kind of like soccer, where if you start slow, your ass is getting fired.
Yeah, and look, it's not been good. And I think there have been points over the last 2.5 seasons, where you can kind of point to LaLonde maybe losing parts of this locker room, or maybe guys just kind of putting up a wall and kind of blocking some of the sound out that he's trying to preach. But at what point does Steve Yzerman have to take responsibility for this, right? I mean, this is a team that is not scoring goals. They're 18th in the league. I believe they're 18th in the league in scoring goals. Or no, even worse than that. I'm sorry. They are seventh from the bottom in scoring goals, and it's just, you have a defense that does not do a good job of supporting your goaltender. I think there's something like 22nd in the league for goals against. It's just a bad mix, man. When you don't have goals going in and you don't have anybody who can support your goaltender, you're not going to keep goals from going in. So I just think it's a bad mix. And I think a lot of this falls on Steve Yzerman. Yeah, I think LaLonde plays a major part. And Steve Yzerman, if he's going to make a change, now is probably the best time to make a change. But at the same point, I don't even know who you go get. Do you go get Gerard Gallant? Is that who you turn to? I'm not sure what can fix this team, because some of the moves that Steve Yzerman made during the offseason were pretty uninspired. The goaltenders that he brought in and the goaltenders that he brought back, you were just kind of like, all right, cool. We're just going to reshuffle on these guys. And you look at defensively, it's just Mo Sider. Like, that's what you got. You don't really have any defensive stalwarts who are going to be able to support that bum ass goaltending that you just hit the reshuffle button on. And then offensively, we've been preaching it for years. Like, you want to build a team around Dylan Larkin. Dylan Larkin is not a first-line goal scorer. Dylan Larkin is a very average player, and you're paying him elite money. He's not that guy. He's never been that guy. He's never going to be that guy. DeBrincat was supposed to come in and help fix some of that and give him a little bit more pizzazz, and that really hasn't worked. And offensively, Yzerman didn't go out and sign anybody to really help bolster the forwards. So you were counting on guys like Lucas Raymond taking a step forward. You were counting on maybe Casper coming up and contributing. Defensively, you were counting on Edmondson being a major key. He's a rookie. Like, it's a young team. And it just, a lot of this to me isn't necessarily LaLonde's fault. A lot of this is Steve Yzerman's fault because he didn't do enough and he hasn't done enough. And this team is flawed the way it's built. It's built around a player who is on a very good team, He is probably a second-line center. On a Stanley Cup winning team, he's probably your third-line center in Dylan Larkin, and that's your captain. That's the guy who you've built this roster around. And to me, it's flawed. The whole thing is kind of the shits. If he gets fired, wouldn't surprise me. If he does get fired, it's like I said, man, it's kind of what it is. I just think it's a bad mix of groceries, and you're looking at LaLonde like, hey, prepare me a feast, and he's like, I've got rotting vegetables and I've got meat that's about to turn. I don't know what you want me to necessarily do. So if firing LaLonde shakes the guys up and gets the boys playing harder, sure, go ahead. But I think Steve Yzerman is going to have real issues this upcoming offseason because he didn't do anything this past offseason. And at some point, we got to start looking at Yzerman as being the problem here.
Online, the reaction's been pretty much universally in favor of firing LaLonde. Joe gets in on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. Should fire Kopp, Comfer, Petrie, and Sherrill first. Some funny comments about Fedorov, bringing him back. Danny P gets in. He's still coaching. Many people are saying this should have been done last year, and I think universally people are wondering why the Red Wings just haven't decided to make this move. And it's uninspiring hockey. It's unfortunate because I thought LaLonde would have success here, but I don't know if it's one of those deals where, maybe Yzerman has to give him a vote of confidence to spark the team, but something's missing. It's kind of like they're going through the motions. It just has the feel of a team not playing well for their coach.
Well, here's the thing. You're 26th in scoring, right?
Yeah.
Who do you look for to put goals in the net? You look at guys like Larkin.
Yep.
You look at DeBrincat. You've got an older guy in Patrick Kane. You're looking at Lucas Raymond, who really has struggled to find the back of the net. But again, you were counting on him taking monster steps forward this year, and you started heaping a whole bunch of pressure on him. Remember, last year when he was performing, he was the guy who took the team on his back at the end of the season, and he started putting the puck in the net. And it was out of one of those modes of kind of desperation. Like, you're throwing everything at the wall, you're playing loose, you're playing fast. It's a little bit different now. And if Steve Yzerman would have went out and got another forward, another primetime guy, spent some money, instead of going out and bringing in a guy like a Tarasenko, who, again, another aging veteran on the downside of his career, you might have gotten a little bit more productivity from a guy like Raymond, who would have had a little bit less pressure that he's playing underneath. But you're looking at that guy who is very young still in his career to deposit 30 pucks in the back of a net. And Dylan Larkin, for as whatever you think of him, he's more of a 20-goal scorer, maybe a 25-goal scorer. He'll bubble up. He'll throw 30 in the back of the net. But he's not this elite goal scorer. DeBrincat's kind of the same way. DeBrincat's got to play with guys who are going to get him the puck so that way he can do stuff. So it's just like you're not – the way the NHL is built now, you have to be able to move fast. You have to be able to score in transitional hockey, and you've got to be able to apply pressure with your forecheck that forces turnovers. And when you get those turnovers, you have to be able to capitalize. This team is not built for that. You don't have guys who are gifted enough with scoring the puck. And then defensively, you don't have guys who are big enough bullies on the blue line to really help assist and help clear traffic in front of your goaltending. And your goaltending is what it is, man. It's like taking a cardboard box or a shooter tutor and throwing it out there. Cam Talbot's on the back end of his career. Billy Husso can't ever stay healthy. You have Alex Lyon, who we're really not sure what Alex Lyon is. Like, is he a guy who can take over a team and be your number one guy? We've been saying this for 2 years now. You don't know. You have no idea what this guy is because he's so freaking inconsistent, and that's your goaltending. So it's just, dude, it's a bad mix. And the fact that we're in this position, I am not surprised. This is a team that is in the bottom of the Atlantic Division, and they're staring up at just about everybody else.
If the Red Wings decide to move on, any names that would instantly take over? Do you like the assistant coaches, or do you feel like, man, Yzerman just has to wait until next year to get somebody that could come that's a hot name? Because I don't think the Red Wings would, have all of a sudden this spark, but I do think that maybe a change would propel them at least to get to the postseason. I think this team has the makeup of a team that could be a first-round team, but that's what stinks is that it was real. You saw it too, cuz it was real weird. The talk around the team was setback. It's a team that maybe taper expectations. I just thought that in rebuilds, you typically don't see that kind of talk where, the way in which the normal sporting trajectory in sports is you take steps, baby steps, but typically you take baby steps forward. And teams, it may be one of those deals, but teams aren't supposed to plateau and take step backwards in a rebuild. It's kind of like you hope if things are going well, you ascend steadily up the ladder from a team that doesn't make the postseason to one that gets there, then loses a couple series, then maybe wins one. But taking a step back at this point with Yzerman's tenure, I just think that more and more people are starting to sit there and go, wait a minute, is Steve Yzerman the answer? It's real weird. It's a real weird situation to be in. And the Lions were in that same spot, and ownership came out and said, hey, calm down. It's going to be fine. We trust it. But you kind of saw that, okay, there was some young talent and some high picks. The Red Wings just haven't been that lucky in the draft, and doesn't seem like if he were to say it, it would have the same weight. If Steve Yzerman or ownership comes out and gives a vote of confidence, it's a real weird spot, and it's kind of looking like this team is taking a step back, putting the rebuild in a very weird spot that we'd have to dissect in the future.
Yeah, look, as far as current coaches, you look at their special teams, right? You look at their special teams unit. Their power play is very good. It's third in the NHL. All right. So I believe that is coached by Alex Tanguay. I would maybe give him a shot if you're looking at a coach that is currently on this roster. You've got, Bob Boughner or Boughner.
Bob Boughner, baby, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you
rise out of team.
Who's LaLonde's basically his assistant head coach. It's like his next guy, I guess. But I don't know, man. None of those names really do it for me. I threw a name out earlier, and it was Gerard Gallant, and you got to see what he could do with a young team with Florida a couple of years ago before Paul Maurice took over. I thought he was kind of pushed out of Florida unceremoniously. Now, it worked out for them because Paul Maurice is a very good head coach, and he got them a Stanley Cup. So maybe you go the route of Gerard Gallant to help straighten things out. He was a forward here in Detroit. I know he likes to play a very physical style of defense where everybody is accountable. And that sounds like, if you listen to Steve Yzerman, you look at some of the moves Steve Yzerman has made, it seems like that is what his expectation is. It seems like he expects you to be defensive-minded, expects his defense to be physical, expects his defense to basically take guys out and line up on guys and basically clear everybody out so the goalie has a decent look at the puck as it's coming in on him. You're not really getting that right now. So maybe Gerard Gallant could be the guy who comes in and fixes it. But I don't know if you go get him middle of the season. I'd have to look to see what he's actually doing. I know last time I checked he wasn't coaching, but he might have gotten a job, might be doing something in a minor league system. I'd have to look, but none of the names on this current coaching staff really do it for me. Like I said, Alex Tanguay, I believe he runs the power play, and that's probably the best subunit on this team right now. So do you give him a crack? I don't know. I don't know if that's the answer. I don't know if that gets everybody going. And again, sometimes it's just a change in the room, right? Change the voice up. It starts hitting a little bit different. And it also kind of sends a little bit of fear through all the guys where you better get on your game here. So maybe you do fire LaLonde, and maybe you do promote one of these other assistant coaches or associate coaches, and we go from there. But I don't have the answer. This has been an incredibly frustrating rebuild watching the Detroit Red Wings, especially when back ends of seasons, right, in back-to-back years, they make this push and they look really good for this stretch, and then it all just kind of comes apart. It's like paper mache. It gets a little bit wet. Next thing you know, it's just a pile of mush in your hands. That's kind of what it feels like the Red Wings are at this time.
Yeah, and now to be factually accurate, I think the podcast should call him Bob Boughner. But I went to the reliable site Wikipedia, and the proper pronunciation.
What's the phonetical pronunciation?
Bob Boughner.
Boughner. Sorry, Boughner. My bad.
But in the end, the H in most English language is silent. So we're gonna say here, honorary at the podcast, Bob Boughner could come in and get a rise out of this team and hopefully get them into the postseason. You know what I mean? And everyone else can call him Boughner. But we here at this podcast, we are going to go officially name him Bob Boughner, the guy tasked with getting
Bobby
everybody.
Stiff Tits. Let's go. He can be the guy.
Everybody's got to rise to the occasion and play harder and do the things they need to do. Do the things they need to do to get more points. Play harder with Bob Boughner. Let's go. All right. That was fun. See what happens when the team stinks? We lower ourselves to the standard of trying to figure out who the hell can fix this team, and we have to look up how to say their names because the H is typically silent in most names. So you were right to assume that. And listen, we'll try anybody. We'll try anything to get this limp team in a better spot at this moment in time in the NHL. All right, let's turn our attention to the 9-1 Detroit Lions, baby. What an ass kicking that they were able to deploy against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And it's crazy because how fast teams will turn on a coach. When things go bad, you get the rumor swirling that Doug Peterson could get fired, and all of a sudden people are talking multiple reports that if the Lions destroy the Jaguars, that he could be out of a job, and the Jaguars played like it. And it's so weird how that can permeate. And you saw a 13.5, 14-point spread. The Lions were able to dominate. It was one of the most dominating wins in Lions history. It was the worst loss in Jaguars franchise history. The Lions also curb stomped them a couple decades ago. So, when things are bad for the Jaguars, the Lions are always there to kind of, take them out and put a bullet in their heads. So it's crazy. It was fun to see. It was great, for everyone covering it to kind of have the game be over by halftime so you could get your shit in and take care of it. But this was a dominating win.
Just sitting there in the press box eating food.
Yes, right. Watching it and just being like, I can watch some football and see what's going on for once because nothing's on deadline and nothing. Your story's done. It's a dominating win. And who's letting up the stat sheet. So how would you describe what you're seeing from the Detroit Lions through 11 weeks, a 9-1 football team?
I think if I had to put it in one word, it would be complimentary football. But if I needed to elaborate a little bit more on it, it would be complimentary physical football. This is a team that is so well balanced across the board, whether it's offense, defense, or special teams. If one of those units is having a bad day, the other unit's going to pick it up. But they are physical with you. They are popping you and blowing you up every chance they get. Offensively, that offensive line bullies you. Your running backs have no problem plowing into you. You have wide receivers that have zero problem blocking you downfield and getting physical with you and taking liberties with you. You go to the defensive side, you had Brian Branch knock Evan Ingram into another dimension in this game. You've got Kirby Joseph out there looking to take guys out, headhunting dudes. And I don't say it as like what the New Orleans Saints were doing. He's just out there looking to lay a good lick on a guy. Amik Robertson, another guy who's looking to pound you. And that's just your secondary. Those are usually the guys who shy away from hitting you. You've got safeties and you've got cornerbacks like Carlton Davis who are willing to come up and stop the run. Those are normally a position on the team where guys don't really want to get hurt. Guys don't really want to come up and hit and pop pads. Those dudes want to. And you see it all throughout this team. That defensive line is nasty. It'd be a lot better if they had Aiden Hutchinson because it'd be even nastier. Your linebacking core, nasty. Dudes who like to fly around, hit dudes, and make plays. It is a very physical team that is incredibly well-balanced and complements each other. I think the big thing, and I think maybe the hardest thing for Lions fans, is there's a bit of discomfort right now. And I wanted to ask you this because at no point have we ever had reference for what we're seeing with the Detroit Lions. You look at the Detroit Tigers and you look at what they did this year when they went on their little playoff stretch. You could look back to that 2006 team. You're like, oh, yeah, they got hot during that 2006 team. That was really, really cool. Maybe these Lions have some of that magic. You look at the Pistons, and the Pistons had stretches there where they just dominated for half a decade. And you're like, man, if Pistons could get good, could be like that 2004 team. You have that reference point. You look at the Red Wings. Red Wings were dominant for over a decade. And the one thing that we just got done talking about is what we want. Again, we want that team to be dominant like they were a decade ago. For the Lions, at no point in your history have you ever been good. Have you ever been, like you said, to open the show, they're the number one team as far as power rankings go everywhere. Everywhere. It's not just YouTube. It's not just Yahoo. It's not just SI. It's not just ESPN. It is everywhere. This team is the best team in the NFL. This team is the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl according to Vegas. As a Detroit Lions fan, are you uncomfortable with all of this success and all of this praise? This is something that we've always wanted. You know, watching those Patriot teams with Tom Brady, you were always like, man, if the Lions could somehow just figure it out and crack the code and be as good as those guys. Or you go back to the 90s when it was supposed to be the Lions and the Cowboys cracked the code, figured it out. The Lions never did. You're like, man, if we could just be as good as the Cowboys. Never could do it. You go back to the 80s, the Joe Montana-led 49ers. Always wanted to be that. We're never, ever that. We are now that team. You are now the it team, Detroit Lions fans. You are them. You are him. How uncomfortable is it, though, with all of this success being talked about in that rarefied air of being teams linked to other teams in history, like the greatest teams ever in this league? Being linked to Super Bowl odds that have you heads and tails favorited over everybody, have you ahead of the two-time defending champs who seem to regularly have the referees in their back pocket, just saying, Kansas City Chiefs. Being a team that has been so successful through this part of the season that everybody is now taking notice, and it even sounded like the fans at Ford Field were, I don't want to say bored, but it was more of that honorary clap, that good job, guys. All right, let's move on and let's take care of whoever we got to take care of next. It's now the expectation that you are going to run up the score, per se. It is now the expectation that you are going to jail sex whoever comes into this house. It is now the expectation that you are going to win the football game, which is something we've never had before. How uncomfortable are you with this?
Not at all. I think it's great to hear the to hear the national media celebrate the Lions, talk about them in opening segments on ESPN. To see them written, SI has had them in the power rankings number one for like 3-4 weeks now. It's good to see them highlighted because it's a team that has historically never been at the top of the mountain. It's a team that, because you've said it, this week will mark the first time ever that the Lions ever became betting favorites to win the Super Bowl, ever, in the history of the NFL. And I think probably safe to say the first time that universally across the board in power rankings, which outlets do every single week, since the history of the digital internet platform, that every outlet put the Lions number one. It's a time to celebrate. It's a good time. And here's the best part, because the Lions coaching staff and the players are not buying into it. Jared Goff was asked, what does it mean to be Super Bowl favorites? He said it means nothing. We're in the middle of the season. It doesn't mean anything. And here's the sick part. The attitude of the team this week was basically that they treated the Texans game like a loss. They won the game. They didn't sit on their laurels. They didn't puff their chest out. They treated it like, man, we didn't play good. We didn't play to our standards. And because that's a sign of greatness. When you have success, when you've won 7 games in a row, and you treat it like, you know what, no, we're not happy. Like, we have standards. Our quarterback threw 5 interceptions. We got him run out of town in Houston. We didn't play good. The offensive line was not happy. And you're winners of 7 straight, and you go into the game against the Jaguars, and you're like, we're angry. We're not happy. And in the end, what happened was the Jaguars were just a team in the way of a pissed-off NFL team that did not want to feel that way, that they didn't play their best. And
this team has their own expectations.
Yes.
It's not what the outside expectation is.
Exactly.
It's what this team expects of itself and demands of itself, which I think is an incredibly high standard, which is awesome.
That's
something
what
that
you need.
we've not ever seen before.
Exactly, where the guys in the room are like, yeah, we're good, but I think we can be better. Where Dan Campbell goes on the radio and says, I think there's stuff to clean up. And they're like, what? Like, you just won the game 52-6. He's like, I think we could score faster. And you're like, oh my God, if that's the message being preached, this is great. This is where you have a foundation of competitive guys that, will have fun doing it, but also criticize themselves to the point where they say, hey, we can do better. We can win bigger. We can play faster. We can play cleaner. And Dan Campbell has put it out there. Every team knows they can't play perfect, but they're going to try. And they want to try every week. And you're hearing the psychological mastery of what Dan Campbell's doing. He knows that the team is bitter after their 49ers lost. They're bitter because, the Cowboys last year took away a win. They're bitter because of what the officials have done to them. They're a bitter team. And they're like, okay, so we're mad, and who's going to be the person that's going to pay for it? It's going to be the other opponent across from us. And
the thing that's cool too, Dan Campbell's that guy who was on that 0-16 team. Dan Campbell has lived those reffing decisions where refs didn't give you the benefit of the doubt and didn't give you the credibility that you deserve. So he comes in with that bit of a chip on his shoulder as well. He's been there for those made-up NFL rules. We talk about it all the time. There's always something that happens in an NFL season that the Lions are a part of where a rule is made. He's been a part of that. So he comes in, he knows that history. He's lived it. He's experienced it. He comes in with that chip. And I think that from the head down, it trickles. And it feeds into, I don't want to say it's like an insecurity, but it is this thing that really drives this team. It is that chip on the shoulder that, hey, we can be better. We're good. And everybody says we're good. And everybody knows we're good. But we can be even better. And it's that goal every single day to get better. Go out there and outperform what you did. And like I said, it comes from the head down, and Dan Campbell's at the very, very top of that head.
Yeah, and that's what's amazing when you have a football team willing to try and do better. And I just think that, when you have a football team that wants to be that competitive, that's what it's going to take. That's, I think, the one thing about this team that people like is that they're not going to rest on their laurels. They're not going to overlook anybody. And they want to do some things. They want to accomplish some big tasks. Based on what you saw from Jared Goff, do you think that – I don't think he ever really left the MVP conversation. He'll be in the conversation. I just think that it's kind of a media-driven thing where the most popular guy kind of gets it. So, Goff has a chance, but I would give it like maybe a 40% chance of winning it because – the hype machine kind of is always behind Mahomes, and now it's behind Josh Allen from what you've seen after a convincing win against the Chiefs there. You go in, and it's two AFC powerhouses, and Josh Allen played well. So I just think that Goff's in the conversation. I know 5 interceptions, and some of the games that where I think against the Titans, he passed for less than 100 yards, but still won because of the special teams. I just think that this football team cares about those kind of things, but it's not a focus. I don't think he wins it this year, but he is playing at an MVP caliber. He's in the conversation.
Yeah, look, I think he should be the front runner. I think he should be the guy. He is playing the most efficient football of any quarterback. Yeah, he had a bad game, right? Well, how did he respond? He came back and he lit you up for over 400 yards and 4 TDs. In that game that he had a really bad game, you go back, you look at those interceptions, and some of those weren't necessarily his fault. Some of those weren't legit interceptions. The one at the end of the half, I don't necessarily know how you count that. It was basically a punt, right? You look at what this team specifically is doing, and he is the most important guy on arguably the best team. So how he's not the front runner, like you said, it is a very media-driven thing, and it is more a popularity contest than anything. I think that does a lot of disservice to this award. He should be the guy who everybody is talking about. It really should at this moment in time, coming off the heels of what happened with Lamar Jackson and him playing very small against the Pittsburgh Steelers again. It should really be a conversation with Jared Goff and Josh Allen. Those should be your number 1 and your number 2 guy. I think at this moment in time, Goff is number 3. He is still behind Josh Allen, who I think has taken over Lamar Jackson, and I think Lamar Jackson is still number 2. But the fact that he is not heads and tails above everybody else is absolutely bonkers to me. Like I said, he has been so clutch this year. He's the first or second quarterback to ever have 2 perfect passer ratings in a season. This is a guy who is playing incredibly efficient football. I know some of the yardage, and he doesn't lead the league in touchdowns, but he is out there doing what he has to do. And this is the guy who really stirs the drink on that offense for what you and I have already said, and what everybody else has said nationally. This is the best team in football. So how he's not leading heads and tails, going away with the MVP, I don't get it. I don't understand it. To me, it's absolutely bonkers that he's not being discussed more in that MVP vote. Now, look, there's still a lot of season left. He's going to have some really good games. He's going to be going up against Josh Allen here coming up very shortly. I think that could be the game that really helps catapult him into the front running of that MVP talk. If he can get a big win against the Bills and he can kind of leapfrog Josh Allen, I think then we might be having a little bit of a different conversation on who the most valuable player is in the NFL.
What do you think of the next 3-game stretch? Colts, Bears, Packers. I do think 2 out of 3 wins, no doubt. The toughest game probably will be the Bears because of the short turnaround. I think it'll be Lions against the Lions. It's always mental when you have that short turnaround. It's interesting with the Colts in that Richardson's going to want to use his legs. Clearly, they're going to want to establish the run, but I just think that Richardson is going to be outmatched by what the Lions are going to do defensively. It's just one of those deals where when you flip-flop quarterbacks, and when Richardson tapped out, it sent the organization into a shockwave. You saw the team kind of be like, whoa, we need to give this a pause. And they tried Joe Flacco because they seriously thought, well, let's see if he can lead us to some wins and keep us in the playoff race. And once Flacco went in and did worse, a lot of turnovers, then they went back to Richardson and said, okay, we just got to develop him and we got to sacrifice the season. The goal is still to make the postseason. They got to win against the Jets, but that doesn't speak to anything because the Jets just recently blew out their general manager, fired Robert Saleh. They're an organization that is
what
just
a mess that organization
complete mess.
Dude, I was thinking about it. I was like, that is some shit that the Lions used to do.
Yes.
And here's the thing. Joe Douglas, for all of his faults, right? Joe Douglas was a decent general manager. I mean, he's drafted pretty well. You look at some of the guys that he's brought in, it's been pretty good. I feel like Aaron Rodgers has really ruined that organization and has really rotted it from the inside out. And it's unfortunate that a guy like Robert Saleh and a guy like Joe Douglas have lost their jobs because of the owner wanting to bring in Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Rodgers being as toxic as he is.
Really rough. But just real fast in the NFL, too. Pay attention to the Bengals situation. If they keep losing, that's not a bad spot for a first job for Ben Johnson. You get Joe Burrow, you get T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, and you go, wow, we got a nice running back that kind of have a good season. You add around that, and you go, man, we got Trey Hendrickson, and you go, well, that looks like a situation with patient ownership. Pay attention to the Bengals because that might be a situation that Ben Johnson looks at favorably and goes, yeah, I could work with Joe Burrow. I could make those that offense look a lot better than it currently does. How unfortunate, it stinks. And we'll talk about it too in relation to Dan Campbell's decisions. It sucked because the game against the Jaguars was not all positive. The Lions unfortunately lost their veteran linebacker, Alex Anzalone, and it looked rough too. And everybody knew quickly that was watching on television that he mouthed, "It's broken," and the replay showed that he broke his forearm. Dan Campbell was quick to come out and say, yep, it's an injury, long-term, 6 to 8 weeks, basically ends his regular season, likely to be able to come back in the postseason. But this is a good player that now you look at it, and it's weird that all the injuries are happening on defense. I can understand it, where that's a violent group running all over the place, but it's piling up with Hutch, Davenport, Derek Barnes, and now Ife Melifonwu is likely done for the year, based on what Dan Campbell said after another injury suffered. Fatu Melifonwu can't catch a break. He's working his way back from an injury in a 21-day evaluation, and he gets hurt with a different injury. So it was weird because people thought, well, what does it mean he got activated off of IR? It's just a procedural roster thing. He's going to go back on IR to miss another 4 games and then a 3-game window 21-day window if they put him back. So it's just Dan Campbell said long term. So if he's not going to help you replace Alex Anzalone, the guy that you gotta count on, which I think is somebody that you can trust, is Jack Campbell. He's kind of been the apprentice and has been learning. He's got the great mindset, and I do think it's a drop off, but not to the degree where I think it's going to impact how great the secondary is playing. And when you have a defensive line that is kind of now taking shape with the new veteran, it's a drop off. But I think at least in the first couple games now that without Anzalone, I think the Lions will acclimate, and it won't be as perfect where the last 2 games they haven't given up a touchdown in the second half. But I think that the offense is so good that the defense just has to complement what the offense is doing. I think Jack Campbell can give people a little bit of solace that the defense is not going to take a step back. But losing Alex Anzalone is a big deal for a defense. He was a captain. He knew it all. He was somebody that really knew everything about how Aaron Glenn thought about defense. And now we get a chance to evaluate, all right, Jack Campbell took a second-year jump. Now just how much when he's thrown into action now? He's going to wear the green dot. He's going to be the leader. What's your reaction to Anzalone going out, and what's your confidence in Jack Campbell?
Look, I think losing Alex Anzalone, first let me address Alex Anzalone and the loss there. That's a huge deal because this guy was the heart and soul of this defense. He was the guy that he was the first foundational piece that they brought in to build the defense around. He's a guy who had arguably his best season last season, and he was playing one hell of a season this year. So losing him is a big deal. Replacing him is going to be difficult. And you tell me if maybe I'm out of line. I wasn't as shook up as I was when Aiden Hutchinson went down. So Alex Anzalone going down, yes, huge deal. Foundational piece. I wasn't as worked up, wasn't as concerned because, like you said, you've got Jack Campbell, you got Rodrigo, who's been playing well. It's now time for Jack Campbell to sink or swim. Jack Campbell has been one of those guys. I believe he was a first-round pick, if memory suits me correctly. This is a guy who there was a lot of high expectations for, and he's had a very uneven year and a half in his role. And I know that there's a lot dumped on his plate because they were expecting him to be the guy to take over for Alex Anzalone or the guy to really push Alex Anzalone. So now is your time. It is sink or swim. We are throwing you into the deep end of the pool, and it is now on you. And look, Campbell's been good. The thing was, when he was drafted, he was supposed to be great. So does he take that next step in his development? I like what Rodriguez did this past week when he had to fill in a little bit for Alex Anzalone. I think Campbell will kind of steady the ship. My thing is what I'm watching for over the next 6 to 8 weeks, because you should get Alex Anzalone back at the back end of the season. My big thing is, can Campbell come in and can Campbell take this job, and can he kind of exceed or at least meet the expectation that we had for him when he was drafted? Because would you not agree it's been a little bit unsteady with Campbell and him kind of taking over that role, wearing the green dot, being that lead linebacker that they were looking for, that Alex Anzalone has been.
Yeah, it's look, man, credit to AG to have all these guys ready. Malcolm Rodriguez was injured for a bit, comes back and is contributing. They did add David Long. That's a name that I talked to the Dolphins writer at SI pretty regularly. You know, it kind of fell off the face of the earth a little bit. Basically meaning his play kind of diminished. He was a captain, and all of a sudden his play kind of diminished, and he got replaced pretty quickly. So he's on the Lions practice squad. It's a name to pay attention to because he's familiar with Terrell Williams from their days with the Titans. So the Lions will kick the can and see what he's got left, but they do like what they have in some of the guys on the roster, Trevor Nowaski, Ben Neiman. So it's going to be one of those deals where luckily you're 9-1. You can weather some adversity, but the number one goal is to be the number one seed. And you just hope that Jack Campbell, look, it's just basically Jack Campbell's going to come in and be able to replace everything going on. And I don't think, you need, it's not going to be a big drop off to face off against the Colts and the Bears. Now, where it might hurt is the Bills, because luckily you play them at Ford Field, but that I think will be a test. That might be the biggest test for the rest of the season. But I do think that the games against the Vikings, and here's the blessing, you got to go out on the road against the Bears, but you play the Bears Packers and Vikings at Ford Field. So there's a distinct advantage that you're going to have there. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm not concerned about the stretch. But look, it's a tough injury, and the defense is taking a licking. And it's one of those deals. What did you make us if you saw Kirby Joseph? And the narrative is kind of out there because people are talking about it more and more. They're like, you guys are destroying teams. And, people are talking about the Lions maybe should have rested their starters. Dan Campbell said, hey, it's the NFL and stuff happens. So he doesn't ever see himself pulling starters in the second or third quarter. But clearly not as a strategy too often if you're up by 28 to 35 or things like that. But in this distinct moment, okay, I think it's fair to say that and evaluate. Look, you're playing the Jaguars, who are mired in controversy with rumors swirling they're going to fire their coach, with Mac Jones at quarterback. Do you think, up 35, 36, that they were going to mount this epic 4-touchdown comeback? If you pulled a couple guys offensively, you could have maybe kept the defense in, no problem. But maybe Goff, St. Brown, Jameson, basically the offense, I don't think it would have cost them too much. But Dan Campbell is in the manner in which he says things is we're not going to risk, when you start to let up is when you really do get actually hurt. He's like, we're going to play guys most of the time until the fourth quarter, and if it's comfortable, then they'll make the decision. Are you okay with that? It's just one of those deals where everybody hopes no injuries happen. But in this case against the Jaguars, where people were sensitive is because they just saw a team captain break his arm. And you're like, this is against the Jaguars. You probably could have rested Alex Anzalone from the start of the game. You could have given him a week off, but it happens. You're getting to that point where the injuries on defense are piling up, and the way in which they practice violently, aggressively, when the pads are on, they compete. Just look at all the interviews of the new guys. They're like, damn, this practice here is different. And even without pads, it's competitive. It's brutal. So I think it's taken a toll on the defense where, if you just look at it, if he's practicing, he's working his way back, gets hurt again. That's probably due to a combination of his previous injury impacting his body, but also, too, the Lions don't mess around in practice. Like, they push. And the only thing that they're doing is they give their team an extra day of rest with a lot of walkthroughs on Wednesday. So because of the bye week situation, are you okay with Dan Campbell doing that? Or do you say, look, one time you could have made an exception and pulled some guys a lot earlier. You're playing probably one of the worst playing teams in the NFL when they came to play you.
I was surprised that it was as late as it was when he started pulling guys. There was a point in this game, especially coming off of losing Alex Anzalone. Earlier in the season, you've lost Aiden Hutchinson. You've had guys get nicked up and beat up. You brought up Iffy not probably coming back at all this season. So it's not like you're not dealing with injuries, right? Like Carlton Davis broke his thumb at practice. So the injury bug is floating around this team. And the one thing that could really derail this team besides itself is an injury. So the fact that you've got your quarterback out there, you've got arguably the best wide receiver in all of the league still out there. You've got your dynamic duo of running backs still out there. You've got guys on the defensive line, which is kind of a spot that's looking a little bit thin at this point, still out there, especially earlier in the game. You had Zadarius Smith get bumped and get the wind knocked out of him, and we all thought that was going to be a little bit worse than what it actually was. Yeah, I was surprised that he didn't pull guys out sooner. All that being said, I get where he's coming from. Like, we're playing football. We've got a job to do. We're going out there. Just because we're up by, 36 points in the third quarter doesn't mean these guys aren't going to get their reps. I agree with him in the fact that in his mind, if you have a big enough lead, guys are coming out in the fourth quarter. And that's how I feel it should be. With a team like Jacksonville, that you've basically took their soul in the first 2-3 drives of this game, I wasn't expecting him to pull guys at halftime, but I was expecting him to start to kind of shuffle the deck a little bit, start working some of the other guys in with that first team unit and getting some of these first teamers on the sideline. That being said, Goff was a guy who I was expecting to be in there until just about the fourth quarter. Hendon Hooker does need reps, but you're going to leave Goff out there because I want to see what some of these other wide receivers can do. I want to see what some of these other running backs can do. I want to see what some of these other defensive linemen can do with Goff at the helm. Just because if somebody does go down, you're going to have to slot in, and you need those reps so you know what you're doing with the starting ones. So I don't think that he was out of line for what he did. And I find it weird that that's kind of what we're talking about. Like, he was piling on and he was putting it on these guys. They were just out there playing football. It's one of those things where it's a grown man league, right? So I'm going to go out there. You got to stop me. If you can't stop me, I'm going to score. It's your job to stop me. That being said, you don't want starters getting hurt. And that is obviously the concern. So it's a bit of a balancing act.
Yeah.
I thought the way he handled it was just fine. I didn't see a big deal with it. But I will tell you this, that was something that was being discussed in a friends group that I have. And that was something that was being discussed when I was over at my in-laws' house as we were watching this game unfold, celebrating my mother-in-law's birthday.
Yeah, it's because everyone's scared of injuries, and especially when one just happened right before your eyes. And we've all seen Hutch break his leg, now 2 broken bones with Hutchinson and now Anzalone. So it's a little bit wild, but you're getting to that point where you can ill afford to lose any more key pieces of your defense. But it's testing how Brad Holmes built this roster. But man, it's a good problem to have, to be able to talk about, hey, they should pull starters in the third quarter because they're whooping on teams so bad. And now the guys like Kirby Joseph are like, yeah, if you're not coming to play, we're coming to whoop your ass. And that's just an organizational philosophy. And
that's something I love, too.
I love that.
Mentality,
we all love that. Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's not a problem. It's one in which it'll carry you to success way, down the road. It's a great thing. It's competitive. It's kind of the way it's supposed to be. Does anything about the Colts scare you? I just think that, they've been gritty. They are tougher. I don't think it'll be a blowout, but, I do think maybe 7 to 10 point win, 30-20 in that neighborhood. I do think that, Richardson can create a little bit. They'll move the football a little bit, but not to the degree I think it's going to worry the Lions. I think it's a nice, comfortable win. And here's the best part. Indianapolis, hour-and-a-half flight, if that, and 5-hour drive. So I think Sea Blue is going to take over and have themselves quite the party in Indianapolis this Sunday.
Yeah, look, Indy is so dysfunctional right now. Like, everything surrounding Anthony Richardson is just not great, right? Like, he had a decent game this past week, and they got a win against the Jets. Jets are absolutely trash. There's nothing about them that really stands out to me where I'm like, oh, you need to be afraid of this. This is one of those games where I think you're going to see that Honolulu Blue take over their stadium. I think the Lions are going to go in there. They're going to handle business. It's going to be one of those things you're punching in and then you're punching out, right? Like, we're here for a business trip. Let's get in, let's get out, let's get home, and let's get prepared for Thanksgiving. So I think this right here is a game where they go in, they end up winning. I think they win. Jake Bates got to get a field goal. The guy's been so clutch and so fun to watch. They win 38-13. Maybe I'm high on my own supply. I think that this is a good test for dealing with a mobile quarterback, dealing with a quarterback that you might have to see come playoff time, a guy like Jalen Hurts. This is a good test for a guy like Caleb Williams that you'll be seeing here very shortly. So I think dealing with Anthony Richardson is going to be kind of the unfolding of some of the bullet points and some of the framework for the defense that they are going to be implementing in coming weeks when they're playing some of these more mobile quarterbacks and guys that they might see in the playoffs. So I think the Lions punch in, they punch out, take care of business, get a big win, and we just keep it moving.
Keep it moving. 10-1, baby. 9 wins in their first 10 games, 8 wins in a row on SI. We did a crazy numbers thing where they set the record for first downs, yardage, how many yards they won by. It was just craziness with what these Lions are doing. I mean, their stat person must be going crazy with all the info they got to keep pumping out with Jared Goff having a perfect passer rating, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 11 catches in a row from Goff. It's just so much positivity. It's fun to be witness to this and to enjoy weeks where you go like, okay, the Lions should win. They go out there and win, and they dominate, and they're entertaining. And when teams are down, they curb stomp the teams they're supposed to. And that's the best part about being a good football team. So guys, embrace it. It's a fun time. It's a great opportunity to be witness to a football team that has a legitimate chance to make the Super Bowl, and that's all we could ask for. And as people debate the Lions, now we can, like, all we've ever asked for is to let's look at the intricate X's and O's and how they game plan and what they want to do and how they attack teams. And I do think that the next couple weeks will be telling, but the Bills game, I think, will be the marker where if the Lions win that and can really make Josh Allen look look like the old Josh Allen where he turns it over a lot, man, the Super Bowl hype train will probably take off at full speed. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Such a fun time to be a fan of sports and to cover everything going on. It's just amazing. Podcasts change the world. People are doing them left and right. New ones are popping up every single day. Athletes understand the value of podcasting for their brand, and it's just a great way to have fun with your friends, tell jokes, and tell stories and break down Detroit sports. And it's a good time, especially to be breaking down and covering the Detroit Lions every week. I look forward to it. Talking to my guy, Adam, the Jock Strozinski. Anywhere that you listen to podcasts, just type in any place that you go, Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, just type in Detroit Sports Podcast. Our content will find you. Hit that subscribe button. Tell one or two people, hey, there's these two guys having fun for a decade, and they keep it real and have some fun via the audio platform. Thanks, everybody. I can't wait for next Thursday where we fire it up again and talk to you guys about Detroit sports and break it all down on the next episode of Doc and Jock.
You fucking podcasters. I said don't let them in here.